25-year event does not make a lot of sense. It makes a lot more sense to take that and increase the channel size capacity from the 25-year to the 100-year event. Take it from 3,000 cubic feet per second capacity up to 4,000 cubic feet per second capacity. But what I'll leave you with is that this alternative will still work. It still has benefit.
But everything about this river enhancement plan really, really sounds good to a lot of people that I've talked to, including Farm Bureau members and Farm Bureau board members. They're not going to endorse these basins. It's, as if they do indeed make these basins, and I don't think we've gotten into that yet, but they'd have to condemn all those houses because it's going to be completely flooded. It's going to be induced flooding. And what's really hard to understand is that this isn't a farmer fight anymore.
Stantec's proposal made a lot of sense to me. I think you could do it in pieces, which was good. In fact, I understand that maybe the Conservancy District and the commissioners are thinking about starting something through Findlay this summer. I know that there are a lot of homes and acreage that would probably be spared, even though, unfortunately, some homes are going to have to be claimed because of the basins. And I know that part of the Stantec's proposal is still sort of going to be for community input and vote. They may start the widening through Findlay, is my understanding, this summer.
I think it's been positive from the calls that I've gotten, that the dry storage area seems to be something that seems to be somewhat acceptable. We certainly realize it is impacting agricultural areas, but the area within the dry storage areas could be farmed when we don't have a flooding situation.
Because farmers, as we go out here in the rural area, yes, we farm all the ground, but all the residences, we're less than 10%. I'm not even sure if we're 5% of the residents. All these residents, they're rural, non-farm. They're not farmsteads like this one here. They used to be. When I was a kid, back in the 50s and 60s, every single neighbor was another farm family. That's not the case anymore. So as all these people have moved out of Findlay because of Findlay flooding, they've moved out of Findlay to higher ground. And there's a lot of beauty. I just went up in this Eagle Creek plan basin. I just saw a dozen houses immediately. All of them would be condemned. And to me, if I was those families, after moving to higher ground, not having flooding as a problem, all at once, I'm going to be flooded. So that other people can be spared.
And just for one of the analysis that the Corps did do when they were proposing the diversion channel is based on rainfall events since 2007. The diversion channel would have only operated 7 times in that 10-year period, where it would actually have a significant amount of flow within the diversion channel. So if looking at it from that standpoint, these storage areas, again, would probably only have a significant amount of water in them, maybe once every 2 years, which would obviously be an adverse impact to any crops that were planted in those areas. But and certainly we can work up a mechanism for covering the crop damages with the farmer and things of that nature. So I think it's a more acceptable option to the general public than the idea of the diversion channel and all the ancillary costs associated with that.
It's maybe not as destructive as this channel was because that was a permanent destruction. They're going to say that this land can still be farmed, and it's right, they can be, but how good a farming will it be? Because if it floods and you have the amount of water that can be on it, that they say that can be on it, what drainage tile and so forth that we have, it can ruin that. It's going to ruin the soil. Many people that have had high standing water on ground, it's just not the same. It takes many, many years for that to be reconditioned. So yes, it can be farmed, but the value of that farmland will be diminished greatly. And yes, it is something that can be used to reduce flooding, but in a 100-year flood, you're talking only 1% of the time. So you're going to condemn all those houses for 1% chance that they're going to be flooded. Out here in the farming world, we never have any guarantees that we're going to have a profit. You know, if yields are low, if prices are low, it's very, very easy. And right now, that a farm economy is that way. Many times our expenses is more than our income. That's not a good plan. The bankers don't like that very well, nor family living expenses and other things. And so where I'm getting at is that as farmers, we're used to dealing with risk. And there's a certain amount of risk that we've got to assume, or we'd never have a farming business if we would have very, very low risk. We know it's high risk. All the sheep that's in this barn, once in a while, they die. Once in a while, they get sick. Well, that's an additional expense. It's going to take away from any possibility of profit down the road. So sometimes as farmers, we don't think that they're willing to take risk, or any time that you try to reduce risk, it's going to cost a certain amount of money. How much money is too much money? They're talking about these basins being like $140 to $150 million. Where's that money going to come from? Doesn't it make sense that we first try to figure out who's going to pay for it, and then let's figure out if we're going to do it? But to figure out that we're going to do it, figure out how to pay for it later, is the average person, even in Findlay, willing to spend several $1,000s for each parcel? See, I'm not sure they are. So I think it's easy to support something that someone else may be paying for, that government may be paying for. But if you're going to be part of the person paying for, that's going to change one's perspective.
Well, I think we're going to obviously have to seek a renewal of the sales tax, and I think it's relevant for both county operations as well as the flood mitigation project. The Blanchard River Enhancement Project is something that I'm hopeful is going to move forward. I'm pretty confident it'll seek the support of the Farm Bureau vote next Monday, the 13th of March. And from there, we should get expeditiously moving things forward with the commissioners and the Conservancy District on that particular component of the project. The other components, whether it's the detention basins, whether it's a diversion channel, you know, those are separate issues that are going to need some more study, et cetera. But we're still going to need money around buying up repetitive flood properties that are still within the floodway. So we're still going to need money around that.
Since 2007, we have purchased 151 buildings and demolished them in the city of Findlay. The good news with that, the total cost about $8 million, but we received federal grants of about $2.5 million and state grants of about $2.5 million. So the county commissioners, the 0.25% sales tax has contributed about $2.5 million. And the city of Findlay, with the programs right after the flood in 2007, put in about $250,000 towards those purchases. Even if all the improvements are done with the program that's proposed by Stantec, we would still have about 100 properties within Findlay that would still be subject to flooding, even if all these programs are put in place. So we still have some targeted areas where we'd like to remove those properties that would be damaged. So the best way to reduce flood damage is to remove what's being damaged. So that's the other aspect of this.
You know, regardless going forward, we're going to need the sales tax. If we were going to do some of the major components that Stantec has also put out there, and that's diversion channels and our detention basins, we've got to look at how to pay for that. And the sales tax currently in and of itself couldn't pay for the scope of a $120 million project. So you'd have to look at the process for assessments. You'd have to look at the process and consideration. Would the city of Findlay put in an 1/8% or a 1/4% of the income tax? But we have to look at multiple revenue streams if you were going to pay for the project as a whole. And I think that's where we need, you know, a process to say how are we going to communicate and convey that within the community, because the financial burden is going to fall on all of us as taxpayers.
I do think you get to a point where you can debate the cost and you can debate when to start and what to start. But I would not take on the engineers. You know, I mean, a lot of people will jump in and say, well, you need to just, you know, blow up the river or cut this bench a little further or something. I think we have to rely on the experts for that. And I think that, you know, to start start the process. Sounds good. I think it sounded to me like Stantec was really going to be taking a lot of input. It sounds like they have either been told or are very interested in what the community thinks. And so I would anticipate a lot of open houses, a lot of public forums, and I would urge everybody to, attend those. It's not all over everybody's head, I don't think. I think it's, we're battling the river. I've heard before, we probably should have never built the city here, but we did. And so when you're battling like your topography and, being on a river, it's not going to be cheap, and I don't think there's any easy way to get around that. But just knowing that devastation, seeing downtown with 4 feet of water at Main and Main Cross Street, I just don't think that we can hopefully allow that to happen again.